Welcome back with another exciting video. Enjoy watching and don't forget to like and leave a comment.
What if one of the most terrifying true stories in American history was hidden in plain sight for decades? Not because people forgot it, but because the few who survived were too afraid to talk. What if deep inside the isolated mountains of the United States, an abandoned place still carried whispers, strange recordings, and unexplained disappearances that investigators could never fully explain? And what if the evidence left behind was real? Tonight's story is not a legend created for entertainment. It is inspired by disturbing real events, forgotten reports, and terrifying mysteries buried deep in American history. A story about fear, isolation, human greed, and something nobody could understand. Because sometimes the scariest mysteries are not the ones we imagine. Sometimes they actually happened. In the winter of 1978, the small mining region near the mountains of West Virginia had already become a forgotten part of America. Most people had moved away years earlier after the mines were shut down. Entire communities disappeared almost overnight. Wooden houses slowly rotted beneath endless rain and heavy fog. Rusted train tracks vanished into forests that locals refused to enter after sunset. The government considered the area abandoned, but locals knew something else remained there. For decades, old miners spoke quietly about strange sounds coming from beneath the mountains, deep metallic echoes, low vibrations that could supposedly be felt through the ground late at night. Some believed abandoned tunnels were collapsing underground. Others believed illegal groups were secretly using the old mines. But a few elderly residents claimed something far stranger. They said the mountains were never truly empty. According to local stories, miners in the early 1900s occasionally disappeared underground without explanation. Search teams would enter the tunnels only to find equipment abandoned exactly where workers had been standing moments earlier. Lanterns still burning, tools scattered across the dirt. No signs of collapse, no blood, no footprints leading away. The mining companies dismissed the stories to avoid panic, but the disappearances continued. In November of 1978, a freelance photographer named Daniel Mercer traveled into the region hoping to document abandoned American mining towns. Daniel was known for exploring dangerous places alone. He had previously photographed deserted hospitals, ghost towns, and old military bunkers across the United States. Friends described him as fearless. But Daniel also believed every abandoned place carried hidden stories that deserved to be uncovered. He arrived near the mountains just before the first major snowstorm of the season. His notes later revealed that locals repeatedly warned him not to stay near the old Raven Creek mine after dark. Several residents even refused to speak about the place directly. One old man inside a diner reportedly told him something Daniel wrote down word for word. "If you hear knocking underground, do not answer it." Daniel found the warning amusing at first. That changed 3 days later. Using an old Jeep, Daniel reached the abandoned mining entrance shortly after noon. The place looked frozen in time. Broken rails disappeared into darkness beneath the mountain. Rusted machinery stood motionless beneath thick snow. Nearby buildings had collapsed years earlier, leaving only skeletal wooden frames exposed to the freezing wind. Daniel spent hours photographing the area. At approximately 4:40 p.m., he recorded the first strange detail in his journal. He wrote that despite the freezing temperatures outside, warm air seemed to flow from deep inside the mine tunnel. Not natural warmth, but humid air carrying a strange metallic smell, almost like rust mixed with electricity. He also noted hearing faint sounds echoing far below ground. At first, He assumed it was dripping water. Then the sounds became rhythmic. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more knocks. Daniel entered the tunnel with a flashlight and camera equipment shortly before sunset. That decision would later make him part of one of the strangest mysteries in American history. According to recovered evidence, Daniel explored nearly half a mile underground before discovering something unusual. Deep inside the abandoned mine tunnel, he found electrical cables running along the tunnel walls. Fresh cables, impossible cables. The mine had been officially abandoned for almost 20 years. Who installed them, and why? Daniel followed the wires deeper underground. His audio recordings, later recovered by investigators, captured growing confusion in his voice. He repeatedly mentioned hearing movement behind him, despite seeing nobody there. Several times he stopped speaking entirely after hearing distant metallic noises echo through the tunnels. Then the recording captured something investigators could never explain. A voice. Not Daniel's voice, not distorted machinery, a low whisper repeating the same sentence. "You should not be here." The FBI later analyzed the recording, but could never identify where the voice came from. At 7:13 p.m., Daniel's audio abruptly ended with a loud crashing sound, followed by heavy breathing and running steps. After that, silence. When Daniel failed to return home, local authorities began a search operation 2 days later. Rescue teams entered the mine, expecting to find evidence of collapse or injury. Instead, they found something much stranger. Daniel's camera equipment was discovered neatly arranged beside the tunnel wall, nearly a mile underground. His flashlight still worked. His backpack contained food, batteries, and untouched film rolls. But Daniel himself was gone. There were no footprints leading deeper into the tunnels, no signs of struggle, no blood, nothing. Search teams spent 4 days exploring the mine before discovering a hidden passage behind a collapsed wooden support wall. The opening led into a section of tunnels missing from official mining maps. That discovery terrified investigators, because the hidden tunnels were far older than the mine itself. The walls showed strange carvings worn smooth with time. Symbols unlike normal mining markings covered the stone surfaces. Some looked almost human, but distorted beyond recognition. Even stranger, investigators found evidence that someone had recently been living there. Old generators, medical supplies, canned food, and dozens of audio tapes. The tapes contained recordings spanning several years. Most were impossible to understand clearly due to static interference, but certain phrases appeared repeatedly. They come from below. Do not follow the sounds. They imitate voices. One tape reportedly contained terrified screaming, followed by knocking sounds identical to those heard in Daniel's recording. Federal authorities quickly sealed the tunnel system. Official reports claimed the area was unsafe due to structural instability, but several officers involved in the investigation later told journalists unofficially that government removed far more evidence than publicly acknowledged. One former deputy claimed military personnel arrived less than 24 hours after the hidden tunnels were discovered. Another claimed investigators found evidence connecting the tunnels to disappearances dating back decades. Then came the strangest part of all. 3 months after Daniel vanished, his sister received a package with no return address. Inside was one undeveloped film roll. When processed, the photographs shocked everyone involved in the case. Most images showed dark tunnel walls and abandoned equipment, but the final 4 photographs were different. The first showed a narrow stone corridor deeper underground than investigators had ever reached. The second showed strange symbols painted across a metal door. The third photograph was blurry, but appeared to show several tall human-like figures standing at the far end of the corridor. And the final image,
final image showed Daniel himself. He appeared terrified. His face was pale, his eyes were open in fear, and behind him, partially visible in the darkness, stood something investigators could never identify. The figure appeared unusually tall, with extremely long arms and hollow-looking eyes reflecting the camera flash. Experts argued for years over whether the image was manipulated. Most concluded the photograph was authentic. To this day, nobody knows what Daniel captured in that final moment underground. But the mystery became even darker years later.
What if a single road in the United States was responsible for dozens of unexplained disappearances, yet authorities could never prove why? What if people driving through a lonely desert highway at night all reported the same terrifying experience? Strange lights, missing time, radio interruption, and shadow-like figures standing in the darkness beside the road. And what if some of those people were never seen again? Tonight's story is based on disturbing reports, forgotten police files, and one of the strangest highway mysteries ever connected to the American Southwest. A mystery so terrifying that truck drivers still avoid the road after midnight, because in certain places across America, the road itself may be hiding something. The year was 1987. Far outside the bright lights of Las Vegas, Nevada, there existed a remote desert highway stretching for miles through empty wasteland. Officially, it was just another forgotten road connecting isolated mining towns and abandoned military zones, but locals had another name for it. They called it the Silent Route. Not because the road was empty, but because people who disappeared there were almost never heard from again. Truck drivers traveling through the region often described an unnatural feeling while driving at night. Radios would suddenly fill with static. GPS systems malfunctioned. Some claimed they saw strange lights floating above the desert hills before their engines mysteriously shut down. Most people dismissed the stories as exhaustion or hallucinations caused by endless nighttime driving, until the disappearances began increasing. Police reports from the late 1980s revealed an unsettling pattern. Drivers vanished without leaving normal evidence behind. Their vehicles were often discovered parked perfectly along the roadside, with doors still closed and personal belongings untouched inside. No signs of robbery, no signs of violence, no footprints leading into the desert. It was as if the drivers had simply stepped out of existence. One of the strangest cases involved a 34-year-old truck driver named Michael Reeves. Michael had been transporting electronic equipment across Nevada during the summer of 1987. According to dispatch records, he contacted his company shortly after midnight while traveling through the isolated highway region. At first, the conversation sounded normal. Then his voice changed. The dispatcher later described Michael sounding suddenly confused and frightened. He reportedly kept repeating the same sentence over the radio. "There's someone standing in the road." The dispatcher asked if Michael needed police assistance. For several seconds, there was only static. Then, Michael whispered something that investigators never forgot. "It's not moving." After that, the transmission ended. Hours later, authorities discovered Michael's truck parked along the highway with headlights still on. The engine continued running. His wallet, coffee cup, and delivery paperwork remained untouched inside the cabin, but Michael was gone. Search teams spent days exploring the surrounding desert. They found nothing, no tracks, no body, no evidence explaining how a grown man could vanish in the middle of open desert terrain. Then, investigators discovered something disturbing inside the truck's onboard cassette recorder. Apparently, Michael had been recording voice notes while driving. The tape captured nearly 40 minutes of normal conversation before strange sounds interrupted the recording. A loud humming noise filled the background, followed by radio static and Michael breathing heavily. Then came the part nobody could explain. Michael suddenly stopped talking mid-sentence. Several seconds passed in silence. Then, another voice appeared on the tape. A low voice, calm, emotionless. Pull over. Investigators confirmed the voice did not belong to Michael, but no second person was ever found near the truck. The case became national news for several weeks before slowly fading from public attention.
But Michael Reeves would not be the last disappearance connected to the silent route. Over the next decade, more than 20 unexplained cases emerged from the same stretch of highway. A young couple vanished during a road trip in 1991. A retired military veteran disappeared in 1994 after reporting strange lights over the desert. In 1997, an off-duty police officer named Sarah Coleman experienced something so terrifying that she resigned from law enforcement only months later. Her testimony remains one of the most chilling ever connected to the road. Sarah had been driving alone through the desert shortly after 2 a.m. while returning home from visiting family. About halfway through the desert region, her police radio suddenly filled with static despite being connected to local channels. Then her headlights flickered. Moments later, she noticed a figure standing beside the road. At first, she assumed it was a stranded traveler, but as she slowed her vehicle, she realized something was horribly wrong. The figure appeared unnaturally tall. Its arms seemed too long, and according to Sarah's official statement, the person had no visible face, only darkness beneath the hood-like shape covering its head. Terrified, Sarah accelerated away from the area. That was when she noticed another figure standing farther down the road. Then another, and another. Silent human-like shapes appearing one after another along the highway edge, watching her pass. Sarah later claimed her car clock stopped functioning during the encounter. When she finally reached the next town, nearly 3 hours had disappeared from her memory. She could not explain where she had been. Even stranger, investigators discovered deep scratches covering the roof of her vehicle, as if something heavy had dragged across the metal. Sarah never fully recovered from the incident. Friends later said she became paranoid, avoided discussing the case, and suffered recurring nightmares involving people standing motionless in darkness. Years later, before her death, she reportedly told a journalist one final disturbing statement. They were waiting for someone. In the early 2000s, conspiracy theories surrounding the silent route exploded online. Some believed the highway passed near secret military testing zones connected to classified experiments. Others believed underground tunnels beneath the desert were responsible for strange electromagnetic disturbances affecting drivers. But a small group of researchers uncovered something even stranger. Historical records revealed that the desert region had a terrifying reputation long before highways existed there. Native American stories from centuries earlier warned travelers about the Hollow Watchers, mysterious entities said to appear at night near certain desert paths. According to legend, the beings could imitate voices and lure people away from safety into the darkness. The similarities terrified modern investigators, especially after audio experts re-examined Michael Reeves' final recording. Using advanced technology unavailable in the 1980s, specialists isolated hidden background sounds beneath the static. What they found shocked them. Faint whispers, multiple voices speaking simultaneously, and one sentence repeated over and over, "Come outside."
The recording was eventually leaked online, where it spread rapidly throughout paranormal communities. Thousands claimed listening to the audio caused anxiety, nightmares, and feelings of being watched. Skeptics dismissed the reactions as psychological suggestion, but strange reports continued. In 2008, 3 college students attempted to film a documentary about the silent route. They entered the desert with cameras, GPS trackers, and satellite phones. Only 2 returned. According to the survivors, their friend Ethan disappeared after wandering away from camp during the night. The students claimed they woke around 3 a.m. after hearing Ethan speaking outside the tent. At first, they assumed he was talking on the phone. Then they realized something horrifying. There was no phone signal anywhere in the region. When they stepped outside, Ethan stood nearly 50 yards away, facing the darkness beyond the road, completely motionless. One student called his name repeatedly. Ethan never responded. Then, according to witness testimony, another voice answered from the darkness behind him. Not Ethan's voice, something else. Stay where you are. The terrified students ran back toward their vehicle. By the time they returned with headlights shining toward the road, Ethan had vanished. Investigators searched the desert for almost 2 weeks. No trace of him was ever discovered. But one item was found abandoned near the campsite, a video camera still recording. Most of the footage showed normal camp activities until the final minutes. The camera suddenly began shaking violently before turning toward the darkness beyond the highway. For several seconds, nothing appeared visible. Then the image brightened slightly. Dozens of tall, shadow-like figures stood silently across the desert landscape, watching the camp. The footage abruptly ended moments later. To this day, experts debate whether the video was authentic or an elaborate hoax. Yet no one has ever successfully explained how the figures appeared simultaneously across such a large distance. Following the incident, parts of the highway were quietly monitored by federal authorities. Surveillance equipment was reportedly installed near several sections of the desert road. Officially, the government denied all paranormal claims. Unofficially, rumors spread that certain nighttime incidents were never released publicly. Former officers later admitted that reports involving unexplained lights and missing persons were often discouraged from reaching the media to avoid mass panic. Even today, truck drivers traveling through Nevada sometimes share disturbing stories over late-night radio channels. Stories about figures standing beside empty roads. Stories about losing hours of time without explanation. Stories about hearing voices through dead radio frequencies. And perhaps most disturbing of all, stories about passengers who appear briefly inside rearview mirrors before disappearing seconds later. Many drivers now refuse to stop anywhere along the silent route after midnight, because according to those who know the desert best, the worst mistake you can make is acknowledging whatever waits out there. If you see someone standing alone beside the road late at night, keep driving. Do not stop. Do not roll down your window. And if your radio suddenly begins whispering your name through the static, whatever you do, do not answer back.